a wedding ring, and an unforgettable tale of love. The autumn of 1878 arrived quietly across the American frontier, painting the endless prairie with soft shades of gold and amber. Cool mornings carried the scent of dry grass, while distant mountains stood beneath bright blue skies. On the edge of a modest horse-breeding homestead lived Myler, a 37-year-old cowboy whose calm smile disguised a heart that had waited far longer than anyone knew. The little property was nothing like the grand ranches owned by wealthy cattle barons. A weathered cabin stood beside a sturdy stable, and beyond it stretched open fields where rescued horses grazed peacefully. Every animal there had once been considered stubborn, frightened, or useless. Myler believed no horse was beyond saving if someone offered enough patience. The people of the nearby frontier town respected him for that gift. Whenever a family purchased a frightened horse that refused every rider, they brought it to Myler. He never raised his voice. Instead, he spoke gently, moved slowly, and earned each animal's trust one careful step at a time. Some wondered why a man with such remarkable skill remained alone. Others believed they already knew. Whenever neighbors gathered outside the general store or exchanged stories beside warm evening fires, they quietly repeated the same rumor. The woman he loved found someone richer. Myler never argued. He simply smiled politely and continued with his work. Only he knew the truth was far more complicated. Every year, on the first cool morning of autumn, he followed the same lonely tradition. Before sunrise, he saddled his favorite chestnut horse and rode several peaceful miles toward a grassy hill overlooking the old stagecoach road. Few travelers used that road anymore. The newer railway carried most passengers west, yet Myler always stopped beside the same weathered cottonwood tree. 5 years earlier, beneath those broad branches, Eron had looked into his eyes one final time. She had been 28 then, her gentle brown eyes shining with hope despite the uncertainty ahead. "I have to leave," she had whispered. "My aunt has no one else. She needs me." Myler remembered every word. "I'll come back," she had promised with complete certainty. "I'll find you again." He had wanted to tell her everything, that he loved her more than open skies, that every sunrise felt brighter whenever she smiled, that no amount of money could ever replace the quiet happiness she brought into his life. Instead, fear stole his courage. He looked down at his worn boots and imagined the comfortable future another man might offer her. A larger ranch, fine horses, a safer life. When he finally lifted his head, he simply wished her a safe journey. The stagecoach rolled away. She smiled through the window until the road curved beyond sight. That smile remained the last memory he carried for years. No letters arrived. No traveler brought news. No familiar face spoke her name. The seasons changed again and again, yet silence became the only answer. Eventually, people stopped asking whether she would return. Myler never truly stopped waiting. After standing quietly beneath the cottonwood tree, he removed his hat for a moment before riding home. It was the only place where he allowed himself to remember what might have been. The rest of his days belonged to the horses. One afternoon, a widowed father arrived with two frightened daughters and an unusually nervous gray mare. "No one can calm her," the man admitted. "She throws every rider." Myler approached without ropes or force. He rested one gentle hand against the mare's neck and waited. Minutes passed. The frightened horse slowly lowered her head. The little girls watched with wide smiles as the mare accepted Myler's touch. "You listened to her," the younger child said. Myler smiled. "Everyone deserves someone willing to listen." The words escaped before he realized they reflected his own heart. As autumn deepened, more families visited the homestead. Some paid with coins. Others brought sacks of grain, warm blankets, fresh vegetables, or handmade tools instead. Myler accepted every honest offering with quiet gratitude. Although he possessed little wealth, he never allowed anyone to leave feeling ashamed. Kindness cost nothing. Perhaps that was why people trusted him. Yet every peaceful evening ended the same way. After feeding the horses and closing the stable doors, he sat alone upon the cabin porch watching the distant road disappear beneath the fading sunlight. Some nights, he imagined seeing a familiar figure walking toward him. Each time, the empty road remained unchanged. Then came another crisp autumn morning. A young family had traveled from the next county to purchase one of Myler's calm riding horses. He adjusted the saddle carefully while explaining how gently the mare responded to patient hands. The cheerful conversation ended when the distant sound of approaching wheels echoed across the valley. A stagecoach. It was unusual enough to catch everyone's attention. The horses slowed before the stable. The driver climbed down first. Then the passenger door opened. A graceful woman stepped onto the dusty ground. She wore a simple traveling dress trimmed in deep forest green, carrying herself with quiet confidence despite the long journey. Her soft brown hair rested neatly beneath a modest bonnet, and although time had gently matured her features, Myler recognized her instantly. Eron had come home. She looked directly into his astonished eyes. Without speaking, she walked toward him. In her hand rested a small velvet box. Silence settled over the stable as though the prairie itself had stopped breathing. The young family waiting to collect their horse looked from Myler to the woman standing before him, sensing that they had stepped into a story much older than the morning. Even the horses lifted their heads, ears forward, while a cool breeze carried golden leaves across the dusty yard. Myler searched Eron's face, hardly believing she was real. 5 years had changed them both, yet her warm brown eyes held the same quiet kindness he remembered. She smiled softly, though tears shimmered near her lashes. "I finally found you," she whispered. Before Myler could answer, Eron opened the small velvet box. Inside rested a simple gold wedding ring that caught the autumn sunlight. Every person standing nearby exchanged surprised glances. The blacksmith's wife covered her mouth. The stagecoach driver removed his hat. No one spoke. Eron took one careful step closer. She looked directly into Myler's eyes and asked the question she had carried across hundreds of miles. "Will you marry me?" The words hung gently in the air. For one beautiful moment, Myler forgot the passing years. He remembered the afternoons they had spent walking beside open fields, laughing as young horses raced through tall grass. He remembered the evening she had admitted she loved him first, and the fear that had stolen his courage before he could answer honestly. His heart wanted to say yes before she finished speaking. Instead, he smiled. It was the same calm smile everyone in town admired, only this time it hid unbearable pain. "You deserve someone better than me," he said quietly. "You should choose a man who owns a proper ranch, someone who can give you everything." The smile never left his face. He acted as though nothing inside him had broken. Eron stared at him in disbelief. She had imagined many possible answers during the long journey west. She had prepared herself for anger. She had prepared herself for silence. She had even prepared herself to discover he had married another woman. She had never imagined he would still place her happiness above his own. The neighbors slowly drifted away, sensing the conversation belonged only to them. The young family thanked Myler for the horse and quietly departed. Soon only the two of them remained outside the stable. Eron gently closed the velvet box. "Myler," she said softly, "do you truly believe I came all this way because I wanted a richer man?" He lowered his eyes. "I believe you deserve one." She shook her head. "No." She reached into her traveling bag and removed a bundle wrapped carefully with faded ribbon. Inside were dozens of letters. Every envelope carried Myler's name written in her familiar handwriting. "I wrote to you every month," she explained, "sometimes twice." Myler carefully accepted the bundle, his hands trembled. "I never received a single one." "I know." Eron nodded sadly. "When my aunt became ill, I stayed to care for her trading lodge. She depended on me for everything. I wanted to return much sooner, but every season brought another responsibility. I kept writing because I believed you were waiting." She paused, taking a slow breath. "Last winter I finally discovered the truth." She explained that an aging postal relay keeper who handled mail for several remote settlements had confessed before retiring. Believing Eron had settled permanently in another territory, he assumed forwarding her letters to distant ranches was unnecessary. Rather than searching for Myler's changing routes while he trained horses across the frontier, the man stored the letters in forgotten boxes. Months later, his replacement found them. Every unopened envelope, every promise, every hopeful message. When the letters finally reached Eron instead of Myler, she understood why silence had surrounded them both. "I cried for an entire night," she admitted. "I thought you had stopped loving me." "So did I," Myler answered quietly. Neither blamed the old postal keeper. The mistake had already stolen enough years. Eron looked again at the ring resting inside the velvet box. "I bought this before I left." Myler frowned with surprise. She smiled through gathering tears. "Do you remember the traveling jeweler who stopped outside the Harvest Festival?" He nodded. "You admired this ring because you said it wasn't expensive, yet it looked honest." "I remember. I went back the next morning and bought it." She laughed softly. "I told the jeweler I hoped to give it to the man I loved." Myler closed his eyes for a moment. 5 years. She had carried the ring for 5 years. "I never accepted another proposal," she continued. "There were kind men, hard-working men, honest men, but I had already chosen my husband." The words settled deeply within him. Still, doubt refused to release its grip. "What if I cannot give you the life you deserve?" Eron answered by smiling. Instead of speaking, she turned toward the stagecoach and held out her hand. A teenage boy climbed down carrying a small travel bag. He appeared about 15 years old with gentle eyes and a respectful smile. The boy approached Myler confidently. "Sir," he said, extending his hand, "my name is Daniel." Myler shook it politely. Eron rested a caring hand upon the boy's shoulder. "Daniel lost both of his parents during a difficult winter several years ago. My aunt and I welcomed him into our home." The boy smiled warmly. "My mother always told me stories about you." Myler looked confused. "I've never met you." Daniel nodded. "I know." He glanced proudly toward Eron. "She said the first honest cowboy she ever loved would someday teach me how to ride properly." Myler's breath caught. Eron had spoken about him for years, not as someone from her past, as someone she believed still belonged in her future. Daniel reached into his bag and carefully removed a small wooden horse. "I carved this myself," he said. "My mother said you'd appreciate handmade things more than expensive gifts." Myler accepted the carving, tracing its smooth edges with trembling fingers. His carefully built walls began to crumble. That evening, after Eron and Daniel accepted rooms at the town's boarding house, Myler remained alone beside his quiet stable. The rescued horses rested peacefully under the fading light. He sat upon an old fence rail, holding the unopened letters in one hand and the carved wooden horse in the other. Above him, countless stars slowly appeared across the clear frontier sky. For the first time in 5 long years, the lonely cowboy no longer fought his grief. He bowed his head and quietly wept beneath the endless stars. The first light of dawn spread gently across the prairie, turning the horizon into a ribbon of pale gold. Frost rested lightly upon the grass, and every breath carried the crisp promise of a new day. When the townspeople awoke, they noticed something unusual. Myler's cabin stood empty. His favorite chestnut horse was gone, and the stable doors had already been opened before sunrise. At the boarding house, Eron looked through the window toward the distant hills. She had hoped Myler would return with an answer. Instead, she found only silence. Although she tried to smile for Daniel, disappointment quietly settled inside her heart. "I think I asked too much," she whispered. Daniel gently shook his head. "No, you asked the right man." Meanwhile, Myler rode across the countryside with quiet determination. He did not travel to escape. He traveled because he finally understood something that had taken him 5 years to learn. Love was not only about accepting kindness. Sometimes it required believing that you were worthy of receiving it. His first stop was the small farm belonging to the widowed father whose frightened mare he had trained only weeks earlier. The farmer welcomed him warmly. "What brings you here so early?" Myler removed his hat. "I need a favor." He explained his plan without revealing every detail. The farmer smiled before Myler had even finished speaking. "You helped my daughters believe that fear could become confidence. Tell me where and when." His second stop was the blacksmith's workshop. Without hesitation, the blacksmith offered polished iron lantern stands for an evening gathering. The carpenter promised to build a simple wooden wedding arch before sunset. The baker volunteered fresh bread and warm apple pies. The florist gathered late autumn wildflowers from nearby meadows. An elderly seamstress carefully pressed white ribbons she had saved for a special celebration. Even the schoolteacher asked whether the children could help decorate the old hill overlooking the stagecoach road. Everywhere Myler traveled, the answer remained the same. Yes, not because he was wealthy, not because he held influence, but because, over many years, he had quietly given his time, patience, and kindness without expecting anything in return. By midday, wagons rolled toward the grassy hill where Myler and Eron had once said goodbye. Neighbors worked together with cheerful determination. Children collected colorful leaves and arranged them beside smooth stones. Women tied ribbons between the cottonwood branches. Men carefully raised the wooden arch facing the endless western sky. Someone polished old lanterns until they reflected the afternoon sunlight. The elderly violin player tuned his instrument beneath the tree. The place that had witnessed heartbreak slowly transformed into a place prepared for hope. Daniel watched everything with growing excitement. He realized the entire town already knew what Myler intended. Only Eron remained uncertain. As the afternoon faded, she wandered toward the quiet hill alone. She believed she had come simply to remember the place where they had once parted. Instead, she stopped in surprise. Flowers lined the pathway. Lanterns swayed gently beneath the branches. Families stood smiling beside neighbors. Children whispered happily while trying to hide behind wagons. The old violinist began playing a gentle melody. Confused, Eron looked around. Then she heard the steady sound of approaching hoofbeats. Everyone turned toward the distant trail. Myler appeared riding his familiar chestnut horse. Beside him walked another horse. It was the gentle bay mare they had rescued together years before, the very first frightened horse they had patiently trained as partners. Eron covered her mouth in astonishment. Myler dismounted slowly. For a moment neither of them spoke. He led the mare beneath the cottonwood tree before stopping a few steps away. The prairie breeze lifted a strand of Eron's brown hair across her face. Myler smiled, though his eyes glistened with emotion. "I spent years believing I wasn't enough." His voice remained calm but honest. "I thought loving you meant letting you find someone with more land, more money, and a better future." He looked around at the gathered families. "Yesterday, I finally realized something. I may never own the biggest ranch. I may never become the richest cowboy. But every person standing here reminded me that a man's true wealth is measured by the lives he touches." He stepped closer. "You crossed hundreds of miles carrying a ring. I crossed one day learning how to deserve it." Eron opened the velvet box once more. Her hands trembled slightly. Myler gently took the ring. Instead of placing it upon her finger immediately, he held it between them. "When you asked me yesterday," he said softly, "my heart answered yes before my voice could." He knelt beneath the cottonwood tree where fear had once silenced him. "This time I won't let fear speak for me." He looked into her warm brown eyes. "Eron, will you allow me the honor of spending the rest of my life beside you?" Tears rolled gently down her cheeks. She laughed through them. "I've been waiting years to hear those words." "Yes." With careful hands, Myler placed the gold ring upon her finger. Applause echoed across the hill. Children cheered. The violinist played a joyful tune. Daniel proudly stepped forward carrying a bouquet of autumn flowers. He hugged Myler first, then Eron. "I knew you'd say yes," he grinned. The simple wedding began as the golden sun settled toward the western horizon. There were no grand decorations, only wildflowers, ribbons, smiling neighbors, and hearts filled with genuine happiness. The widowed farmer walked Eron to the arch after Daniel, saying every bride deserved someone to honor her journey. The blacksmith stood proudly beside Myler. The baker shared fresh bread with every family. Laughter drifted across the prairie while horses grazed peacefully nearby. As evening settled, lanterns glowed warmly beneath the cottonwood branches, creating a quiet circle of light beneath the endless stars. Months later, Myler and Eron transformed the little horse-breeding homestead into a welcoming refuge where neglected horses found patient care, and lonely travelers always discovered a warm meal, honest work, and friendly faces. Daniel became an excellent horse trainer, learning every lesson Myler gladly shared. Together they built not only a successful home, but a place where kindness was valued above wealth, and every visitor departed with renewed hope. One peaceful evening, Myler and Eron stood together on the porch watching horses graze beneath another brilliant autumn sunset. He gently took her hand. "You once asked whether I would marry you." She smiled. And now, he looked across the fields they had built together before meeting her eyes once more. "Now I finally understand. The only thing I ever lacked was the courage to believe I was already enough." Eron rested her head upon his shoulder. Together, they watched the sun disappear beyond the endless frontier, grateful that love, patience, and hope had guided them back to the place where their happiest story truly began.